Breeze or Brez or however you want to pronounce it, this brand right now is on pace to generate over $50 million in 2025 when last year they only did half of that. But here's the wild part. While they doubled their business, they were constantly getting shut down. See, because of the products they sell, they aren't allowed to advertise in the normal way. But the solution for them was actually pretty simple. While they found new ways to actually get people onto their website, they really focused on building an email list so they could really own their own audience. This way, they didn't really have to worry about getting shut down. Now, being an email marketer myself who's journeyed over $100 million for the brands I've worked with, I really wanted to see exactly what was happening underneath the hood. So what I did is I signed up to Breeze's email list, got an idea of the exact emails they were sending me, and going through the different flows and everything, I've kind of grouped it all together so I can go through right now for you exactly what their playbook is so you can apply it for your brand as well. But before we dive into those emails, we have to first figure out exactly how they're getting people into their email list in the first place. All right, so here we are on Breeze's site, and this looks great. So we're gonna say that we're 21 years old, obviously, and here we are. So this is the pop-up on their website, and this is exactly how they're getting people onto their list. This is a very, very high viewpoint, touch point that we want to really focus on, because this is the exact way that they're getting people onto their list. So what this looks like right now, and this is using a very, very strong level of different principles and whatnot to actually drive as much conversion as possible. What I'm looking at here is great language. They're using a mystery offer, they're focusing on a zero-party data collection, and they're using a concept called the micro commit, which is a very, very low friction type of thing to actually get people to click, get them into the mindset of saying yes. And what this looks like right now is they're asking to say, hey, to claim, let us know exactly what you're interested in, THC, non-THC, both. So in this case, I'm going to hit both. So what this gets us into, and now it's going to ask us, what do you want to feel? Social, uplifting, relaxing. Obviously, these are tying to potentially to their products, which is great if they want to actually cater the welcome series to potentially like what people are actually interested in, which is a great strategy. In this case, I'm going to hit social, and then I'm going to go in right now, and it's saying feeling is understanding. Obviously, now we see that the mystery offer is at $5, which is great. At this point, I'm like, hey, might as well claim my $5. So I'm going to put my email address in there, claim $5, and from here, we can actually claim that credit. So it looks like they give you a pretty static code, in this case, feel better 5. Looks pretty universal, obviously not very dynamic to the person and whatnot, which is I have my opinions on it, but this actually works pretty well. So from here, the person can copy their code, they're going to hit the apply $5 button, and this is going to take them to, it looks like a product page, which I'm actually perfectly aligned to with this strategy, because this actually gets them to a point where we get them to having to do less clicks. So from here, if we're driving them to something like this, the Cannabis Trio, which is doing OG, Amplify, and Drift, which seems to be like their big products, we can go ahead and now add to cart, and it already auto applies the code, which is fantastic. Like, this is very, very good as far as increasing and making sure that that customer experience is as seamless and as easy as possible. So from this, applies the code. This looks fantastic. I'm actually completely aligned to exactly how they're getting this through. It does look like they're doing this through probably what looks to be like an app called Alia, which is obviously very, very popular right now inside of the e-commerce space. You're probably going to see this across a lot of brands. We actually use it on a brand called Fly by Jing ourselves, and they're probably getting a pretty strong conversion rate through this. So that's exactly how they're getting people onto their list, and now they're going to tie it to another flow, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. Now, the next step is where most brands drop the ball entirely. They focus way too much on trying to get that email sign up, and they entirely forget the next portion. So they may end up sending these boring welcome to the newsletter type emails, which either one, get ignored by the person receiving it, or two, thrown into the trash, which is obviously what we don't want as like that first touch point with the brand. So Breeze does what I recommend with every single brand I work with, is to craft these customer journeys that are taking these people from a uneducated prospect all the way to an educated potential recipient that is either ready because they to become a customer because they know everything about the product, they've seen all the social proof, urgency is there. But I'm going to walk you through right now exactly how Breeze does this, because they do a great job of actually incorporating this specific concept and just really taking that person from that uneducated prospect all the way to the person who's potentially ready to buy. So let's get right into it. All right, so here we are in Miro, and right now in front of me is every single one of the welcome series emails that I compiled over the time I was on their email list. And I think this is a great series set up here. Now, a lot of it's focused on product education. They got some urgency around the coupons, which is great, and I'll talk through that as well. And then they also have a lot of social proof, which is great. There are some potential improvements that I'll talk about at the end, but I do want to walk through it just one by one, email by email, go through it sequentially, and just walk through exactly why each one performs the way it does. Starting with email 1. Now, I know there are actually 2 emails here. The second email is actually what I got when I just signed up just now for the pop-up, so it does show that they are doing a lot of A/B testing, which is great. And I do actually have some stuff on the second one that I'm like, a little iffy as to what they're specifically testing. Maybe they know a little bit more than I do about potentially some stuff in the background. But I'm going to walk through the first email, potentially walk through some stuff in the second one that I might change based off of the first one, but we'll walk through it. First email, fantastic. This is not like a welcome to the newsletter type email. This is specifically welcoming them to the brand. This is, saying that Brez, for example, delivers euphoria, relaxation, and presence. Love it. I love the CTA language. Experience it. That's fantastic types of language. Obviously very, very tied to exactly what they're bringing to the table. They do actually present the store credit code, which I love. Some brands do miss this, but the reason this is very, very important is that if, for example, like myself, if I, for example, clicked on that pop-up and then decided to leave the website and I forgot the code, where am I going to go get the code? I'm probably going to go look at my email inbox. So it's very, very important that we have that code inside of that first email, because if I forget it, I'm going to go look for the email. I'm going to go try and find the code there. And if it's not present there, then we're kind of losing out on some potential opportunity. As we go down, I love how they're doing this. They're actually using this as the perfect example for product education. This is what they're doing in terms of, grouping up their products, because they do have like their kind of like, hype type of drinks, Amplify and Elevate, which are a little more energy driven. And they have more than OG type stuff, Spirit Flow. These are obviously more of like the more social type drinks is what they call them. And then the tune out, which is for like slowing down, kind of ending it. Drift is obviously more of like that sleep kind of focus, which is great. And then they finished off with some very, very strong things around IRL. Obviously that's a very, very big portion of their business that's coming in. So either finding in a store near them, potentially looking at some upcoming events. I love how this is kind of structured. As we go into this and what they actually put together as their new version, you will notice that their store credit thing and their code is actually gone. So I don't necessarily agree with the direction there. I would recommend at least including it. And it does look like they're kind of shifting away from, obviously educating on grouping everything, which is fine. Maybe people don't need that kind of education, but I am curious to see how this is performing, because I would say that that code is a very, very important thing from a customer experience standpoint, is to at least have it in here. But overall, I love that they're doing testing. Obviously this is only a month apart, so I love that they're doing testing on a very, very, more obviously bigger approach when it comes to doing these emails, but still, potentially lean towards potentially having that code still in here. As we go down, second email, more obviously focused on the social proof side of things. I love that they're still keeping to their, I love their, when it comes down to their design style, love it. And they're finishing off with this welcome 6-pack. And I love when brands do this. So they focus on these bundles that are either specific to the welcome series or whatever it might be for that new customer. And I call them like new customer offers. So in this case, it's a $30 offer. It does look like it's tied to a subscription, so obviously driving more towards that subscription side of things, but framing it as like a welcome pack. So love that they're doing this, obviously pushing towards that lemon elderflower welcome 6-pack, but love the approach there. As we keep going, more education, nothing wrong with that. We do bring back the code, which is great, that Feel Better 5 code for that $5 store credit. Love that they're still doing that. And as we go down, they're doing some more education in this case, specifically on THC, CBD, and lion's mane, framing it as like the science behind the experiment. I love that. So this is especially for taking those uneducated prospects, maybe they aren't aware and aren't tied too much to the industry. So they're obviously they're potentially focusing on people who are just obviously new, potentially people who are more into the alcohol side of things. So this is obviously new to them. So this kind of education is very, very important, and I think this is a perfect place to have it. As we keep going, this type of email, it may seem a little weird, but it actually does work extremely well. And the reason it works is because it frames the product as more than just a standalone thing. When you start doing this in terms of like combining with other things, you can even do this in things like fashion. How do you combine this product with XYZ? You can also do this, for example, we've done this with a brand called Volley, making the same thing, different little cocktails. So they'll all include, like, for example, the ingredients, how to do it, experience it. And even though the person may not even have the product yet, I recommend having this because it shows, hey, this product is more than just this. This is really key for driving more customer experience, because it's like, hey, maybe I want to try it in this. Maybe I'm not interested in using it as just the drink. Maybe I want to actually mix it in this. And it kind of, opens up the opportunity for the reader. As we keep going down, more social proof, can never do, too much social proof, not a thing, at least in my opinion. 8,000 plus reviews. I like that they're calling out the number there. And then they're going through the different reviews and specifically including the actual product next to it. Love this approach, keeping it very, very visual, obviously including the person's name and everything. Love this. And then filling it with a build your own bundle. Build your own bundle is a very, very big thing now. I'm seeing it more and more across brands, and it obviously adds that sense of, I call it freedom in a way, but it allows the person to kind of build exactly what they're looking for. It allows it essentially like a menu type of experience. Like, hey, I want this, 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 and this because I don't necessarily want this. You know, in many cases we do build bundles. It's obviously much easier when it comes down to SKUs and making it a little bit easier on logistics and whatnot. But that certain level of detail when it comes down to, hey, I want this, this, and this, and allowing the customer to pick that experience does go a long while in many cases, and what we've seen some very strong success in doing that. So very curious to see how exactly that's performing, but I'm assuming pretty well. Now this, I actually love this a lot. We typically do last calls at the end of the welcome series, and I may actually take this back as like a strategy to incorporate into some of my own stuff. But this is like a specific thing. They're including a dynamic timer, which I love. They're calling out that the offer expires in a blank amount of time, and I tell this to all my clients, especially with offers, and my clients are probably on this and thinking, okay, here we go again. But with an offer, I always recommend adding some kind of urgency to it by saying that it's going to expire. As humans, we aren't, typically going to do something unless there's a deadline attached to it. So by including a timer, it actually, and putting like obviously making it such that the discount can actually expire, this allows it to make it such that we're adding a why you should use it now. If a person doesn't feel like they should use it now, they're probably not going to use it. So bringing back the code there, and that's all this email needs to be. No product education. I think this is perfect. Doesn't need to be too many things. We get into the habit of adding too many things into an email, and I think this is great. Simple, right to the point. Your offers are going to expire. Fantastic. As we go down, this one, I feel like I did get this as part of the thing. So this does happen from time to time, and I'm not saying that this is like obviously tied to the offer, and this may be something such that, Brez in this case may be pushing people towards their sleep product. In many cases, some brands may include this because they need to specifically focus on some specific SKUs, but I still love it. This is focused on their sleep product. It obviously goes through some educational pieces on exactly like what the difference between the two products is, what the similarities. I love how they're doing this Venn diagram, but then they're going through some product education. So love how they're presenting the product here. Necessarily as far as like a traditional type of welcome series email, no, not necessarily, but I think it does still work. Now love this. Plain text emails do crush, and this comes as far as coming from their brand manager, in this case Corbin. Loving how this is being done. This is them coming in from it just being an hour away. The reason I like this is because the subject line, your $5 store credit code expires in an hour, should fit inside of mobile, so that when somebody's looking at their phone, they see that something's going to expire in an hour. This gets them to click. I guarantee you the open rate on this is a lot higher than their other emails, and this probably does convert very well. So like this, I very much like that these two are very urgency based. Love that approach. And then finally, this does come after the welcome series ends, but I assume what this is just to do is like, hey, what does it look like as far as engagement post welcome series? Do people fall off completely? In this case, it's just a, hey, choose your vibe, experience it. Pretty simple email, probably just checking to see how people are after they get through that funnel. So that's the welcome series. That's how people are being taken from that uneducated potential prospect over to a educated potential person that's ready to convert. And I think they do this extremely well. So I'm going to give them props to this, but this is an extremely well built welcome series. And at our agency, Cracked Attention, we've helped many clients build out welcome series very similar to Brez. We had one client generate close to $2.5 million in revenue just from its welcome series, which is obviously very insane to say. So if you want similar systems built out for you, book a call using the first link in the description, and I'll see if I can help you out. Now, the next series is the abandoned checkout flow. And if you're a brand that's skipping this, you're realistically missing out on millions of dollars in revenue, obviously dependent on site traffic, but think about it. If I'm browsing through your site, I decide, hey, I like this product, I'm gonna add it to my cart, I'm going to get to checkout, and then I leave. Well, realistically, I was this close to becoming a customer. And if there's nothing to get me back on the site to either go through that checkout or anything easy to get me back there, then realistically you lost me. So Brez realizes that this is a very high value and high leverage portion of the funnel. So they're very quick to act when sending out an abandoned type email. So right now I'm going to walk you through those exact emails that they're sending right after I decide to abandon the checkout. All right, so here we are back in Miro, and these are the emails I'm getting right after it. So in this case, I was abandoning the Amplify product. And what it is, and it doesn't have to be that, robust really. So all it is in this first email is they're following up with my cart content. 10 out of 10 would recommend, so good social proof. It doesn't need to be that much here, but what this is that it works for anything that's happening here. So if I decided to abandon their OG product and a different bundle or whatnot, it's always going to work in here. It's always going to populate here. Now they can actually use some custom fonts to make this look a little bit better, but overall this looks pretty good. This did cut off the GIF down here. But we had some USPs down here, and we have obviously some buttons that are going to take us back to checkout. So I think this is great, and I do love that they're actually including this $5 store credit right at the top, and they are, it looks like, using a potential dynamic code. So love what they're doing here, using that obviously keeping to potentially some things. I hope that this $5 store credit is only for prospects, but I like that they're including that there, and they're driving it from that point. Now, moving on to the second email, very, very similar to the first. We still have that headline, we still have that $5 credit, we're still presenting it again. We make it very, very easy to get back to checkout. And then they're including some social proof. So I do like that they're including that here. Very, very important, especially if I'm on the edge of potentially converting. Maybe I'm just looking for that extra bit of, hey, how are people feeling about this product? This right here, I think this does it. I think it does great. So, from this standpoint, I don't think anything needs to be changed here. I think this is actually a great strategy so far. But what I do love, and what I do recommend for a lot of brands, depending on volume and everything else, is this third email here. This right here is an email that's obviously tied straight to what I was looking at. So in this case, amplify your weekend, it's obviously calling straight on here, and it's doing everything that it can as far as social proof, as far as product benefits that are tied specifically to that product. So it gets me to want to go there. And now if I click the experience it button, it's going to take me straight back to checkout and actually get me to purchase that item. So I love the way that this is set up. This is extremely well thought out. It's built to be, obviously to my specific checkout. And I recommend doing this, using conditional splits, however you want to do it, but these typically convert way better than these do. And I would actually even potentially try it such that this was like a checkout now, and even have it as like the first email if there's only one item in my cart. So I love their approach here. And then I love this even better. They have this plain text email coming in at the end. That's like, hey, from Corbin, their brand manager, saying that they have my code here, making sure that I'm using it before it's about to expire. And I think this is a great type of last chance email. And I love what they're doing here. So overall, from top to bottom, this is a great, well-optimized sequence. Now, obviously they can potentially test some stuff with, potentially those, obviously personalized cart things. Like I love this third email. This is the type of stuff that I love to do with brands if they have a very, very small SKU list, because this is obviously where we can really, capitalize on personalization of the cart. But we can do that, combine it with this, and I think this is going to crank. So I love how this is set up. Honestly, not many, improvements I would make beyond this besides just testing potentially order, potentially testing some different social proof, potentially testing that $5 credit, maybe a little bit higher. But I think this is a great setup, so great job. But Brez doesn't stop there. They actually send emails that I'm just, when I'm browsing around the site, they decide to send things based off of what I'm looking at, which is a great flow to have. The browse abandonment is a very, very key thing, and I love exactly what they're doing here. Specifically when I was looking at that checkout abandonment, talking about the Amplify product, this is what I mean by personalization. So let's get right into it. All right, so here we are inside of browse abandonment, back inside of our Miro, looking at this again. Now, this is based off of essentially me looking at their OG product. I love that this is tied to it because many browse abandonment type emails, and depending on obviously your store type and whatnot, you might use a more custom type of thing, and obviously kind of like label it such that it works for any type of product. But in this case, because they know that they only have certain amounts of different SKUs and whatnot, they can cater their emails exactly to what the person was looking at. So in this case, I was looking at OG, and they're calling out that OG is their bestseller, and they're going through this, and they're going through and giving me like, hey, choose your experience based off of the different variants we have. It even has that social proof right at the top, and it takes us right back to it. So it goes from OG Micro, OG Extra Strength, and this is all based on the fact that I looked at only that specific product, and they're drawing me right back to there. I think this is a very, very well executed, more advanced type of browse abandonment flow. Typically on most brands, you'll see something where it's like a, hey, saw you were looking at this, and then just a block that's obviously filled in with what you were just looking at. But this is taking it a step further, and I think this is a very, very well optimized browse abandonment that obviously probably converts a lot better than that more custom catch-all approach. So this is a very, very good example of what looks like a very advanced browse abandonment. Now here's the thing, you could have the best welcome series and you can have the best abandonment flows in the world, but realistically, if that's all you're sending, your list is just going to dry up. So what Brez does is they actually send daily emails, and obviously that's a very, very aggressive sending cadence, but it does keep their list engaged, and I'm going to go right now through exactly what they sent me in the past 8 days. All right, so here we are back in Miro looking at the campaign emails, and I'm going to start with the first one and go through it, but this is a really, really good, just snapshot of exactly what they're sending, obviously not encompassing of their entire campaign strategy, but I love what they're doing here. So I'm going to start with the first one. Find your flow today, obviously calling to their flow product, but I love how they're doing this. Very, very similar to what we saw with like the Amplify type email and the OG type email. They're going through and they're giving the major stuff. So they're going through and doing that product education, and they're following it up with that social proof. So this is a great email for if you either have never seen the product before, or you're being brought back into it and saying like, hey, maybe it's time to order this product. So obviously not very much promo driven around any kind of dollar, offer or anything like that, but I think this is a great email to at least land inside of the person's inbox and give them a kind of like a taste of what is being offered by the brand. So I love how this is done. I think this is a great email. Going on to the second one, I love that they do these recipe type emails. Batch coconut mojito, very, very similar to how we were doing the Arnold Palmer inside of the Welcome series. I love how they're doing this. Obviously pulling a CTA that's going to their IG to check it out a little bit. Maybe there's some content there, but I like that they're doing these type of things. So obviously calling out what you'll need, how to make it. But the real reason that these work very, very well is because they actually work very, very well as a retention type of email. And the reason is because this gets people to actually use the product. And if they love the experience with the product, then they're going to want to buy more. So beyond this being just a, hey, this is a customer experience type of thing, this is actually driving more retention than you think, because it actually gets the person to use it and then want to come back. At the bottom, I like how they're following it up with a reply this email with their favorite mocktail, because they can then bring that to the next piece. But I think this is a great email. Beyond just a customer experience type of thing, it's actually great for retention. Now, number 3, we've actually done this for a few different brands, but this is very, very strong for actually driving retail sales. Now, in this case, they're doing it where they're sending a pic of their, in this case, their receipt, and they're going to get something to double their Brez haul. But how we've seen it in the past is we've actually done it where, they submit their receipt and we actually refund them. It's actually a great way to do it, because it's like, hey, go out in the store, purchase something, and we're going to refund you for it. So essentially it's free, and that does extremely well. But I like that the way they're doing this, 5 lucky winners, but it gets to drive some in-person sales. And I think this is obviously a big portion of what they're trying to focus on right now. So I see why they're doing it, but this is a great email for that kind of effect. Now, next, going back to the build your own bundle type thing, and we've already talked through this. I think this is a great feature to focus, and I love that this is very, very short. Flexible, functional, all you. Once again, it focuses on the fact that it gives that freedom to the person browsing through, that they can build exactly what they're looking for, not necessarily what Brez actually puts together for them, but that custom lineup such that, this is what they want. So love that they're calling the action to it. Love that they're not going too much more than that. Obviously, in my opinion, I see short emails as like a lot more driving straight to it. This doesn't need to be that long. This is, hey, build your own bundle, get right to it, go and do it. This is all it needs to be. So I love that this email is the way it is. Finally, going on to the next thing, I love this email. Now, from a high level view, this may not look like much, but this is I can guarantee you, a very high converting email. This is coming from their brand manager, and it also ties in their founder, and it tells that, the story of them hopping on the phone with their top 3 customers and watching that convo. This is a great community builder. There's nothing better than a recipient receiving this, getting to hear other customers talking about the product directly, and then they're also getting this $10 store credit, which is ridiculous. So I can tell you that this is probably one of their higher converting emails, just based off of the different factors that's been going into it. With just that specific convo being recorded there, followed by that offer, I think that this is probably one of their just highest cranking in emails, just overall. It would not surprise me whatsoever. So very, very good as far as the structure here. If more brands do this, I would love to see that, because this is like this type of stuff that actually does convert. All right. Finally, wrapping up 2 emails for the Sunday and weekend type of approach. So this is, ending the weekend on a note, and they're featuring their Spirit product, which I think is great. I think there's nothing wrong with featuring the product, but what I do like specifically is how they do it. What they're doing is they're actually focusing on the use case of it. So neat on the rocks mocktail. You could have just gone through and just done like a, hey, this does this, and this, and these are the benefits and whatnot. But instead they focus on the use case. I love when they do that, because it actually gets the person to think, okay, that's how I'm going to use it. And I like, hey, maybe I do want to see that. And I love that you can actually see the product in here. And I think this is actually a great way of actually featuring the product. And then finally, focusing on the OG crew, focusing on micro, OG, and extra strength. I love how they're actually doing this through a GIF, but they're doing that, picking their party starters via the bundle builder. And I think this is a great email to end up on. So overall, I just want to call the fact that these emails, while not potentially very promo heavy, I know that this one is obviously $10 store credit. These obviously is a very, very big portion of how they're actually engaging their customers. As we talked about before, they can't advertise in a very, very normal and conventional way, but this is essentially their version of ads. It's going through their email list. And if they're emailing all these people, daily, it essentially makes up for their lack of potential either Meta ads, Google ads, however, whatever they're getting restricted in. And by them being in the inbox daily, it just makes up for it. Now, out of all the flows they've set up, I'd have to argue that the abandoned checkout is by far the most important, because without it, brands are going to miss 74% of shoppers that abandon their cart. So if you want to see exactly how to set this up for your own brand, watch this video right here and I'll see you there.